Awesome admin to application architect. My name's Chris Edwards. I'll tell you a little bit about me in just a moment. I wanted to start by impressing you with the 3 French phrases that I knew. Bonjour, bienvenue, et merci. However, this is the first time I've been to France on a business trip, so I've picked up a 4th phrase, which is Je voudrais un reçu. So there you go, I can now wow you with all 4 of those. Alright, so we're here to talk about the journey from awesome admin to application architect, and this is quite a personal presentation for me because it's a journey that I've been on myself. I've been working with Salesforce for around 6 years, and 5.5 of those years I was an admin. I wouldn't go so far as to call myself an awesome admin, but I was an admin. And then more recently I've got into the world of consulting and architecture, and so I found myself transitioning from admin to architect, not just occupationally, but in some of the certification and some of the learning that I've been doing as well. And this talk is really a kind of summary of that journey for anyone that's thinking of doing the same, making the same change, going on the same journey. So we'll be covering what the application architect track is, and the important thing that I want you all to get out of it really, if you're considering it, is why it's relevant for admins and why it isn't just for people with that already have the word architect in their title or are developers. So we're going to start by telling a little story. So once upon a time there was an admin, and now she was an accidental admin, like so many of us are. We did not choose Salesforce, we did not seek it out, it was put on our desks and said, there you go, you own this now. But the more she learned, because she had to learn, the more she learned about Salesforce, the more she liked it, the more she liked it, the more she wanted to learn. And before too long, this admin thought to herself, okay, I think I could probably take the first step in my certification journey. And she became a certified Salesforce administrator. And you can see she is delighted, and so she should be. That is quite an achievement. But as time went on, she kept learning, and she kept liking it. The more she liked, the more she learned, kept going, and she thought maybe I could have a look at some other certifications. Maybe I could explore the world outside just the admin badge. And then she got confused because she had to make the choice, do I want to stay as a pure admin and go down the kind of the awesome admin route, take my advanced admin cert? If I want to get more interested in the platform side of things, in the olden days I could do the Force.com developer, can't do that now, I could do platform app builder. Or maybe I see myself more as a consultant, maybe moving into a business analysis kind of role, so I can look at one of the Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, consultant exams. Or maybe I don't want to stay broad, I want to go into some kind of specialty, maybe Marketing Cloud, Pardot, or now it could be anything from Community to Field Service Lightning. And you can see she's confused by this, she doesn't know exactly what to do. Now, I would love to tell you that I've got the answer and I can make this admin's life easier and I can make the choice easier for you. The truth is, I'm going to make it more difficult by introducing another option, another direction that you can take your certification journey in, which is the Salesforce Architect Journey. So what is this journey? Well, the Architect program has been around for a while, isn't new, and it's always really been the way to prove that you know the platform inside and out. What is new recently is that there's now 3 tiers of this certification track, this Architect track. So if you look at our very nicely designed pyramid over on the left, essentially at the kind of the lower level here, and the thicker kind of purple and green, we have the specializations. So the first tier that you can go down the architect's journey are a number of designer exams, and we'll talk about the ones on the application architect side on the left today. Once you have ticked off all of those exams, and there's 4 or 5 depending on how much extra homework you want to do, and I'll give you a bit of a spoiler alert, I'm not going to be talking about the 5th, which shows you how much extra homework I wanted to do. You then qualify as a domain architect, so you either get the application architect cert or the system architect cert. There is no exam for those. Once you have got the prerequisite exams under your belt, you automatically get that level of accreditation. And then there's the pinnacle. There's the technical architect right at the top of that pyramid, which doesn't have is not sort of maintained, is not gained in the same way. This one has a review board. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Now, the key thing is, if you decide to embark on this as the way that you want to take your certification journey, you can go as high up this pyramid as you like. But today, we're going to concentrate on the application architect side of things because it's most relevant to those of us that are coming from an admin or a functional background. So what is an application architect? The pyramid on the previous slide was not terribly clear, so hopefully this makes it a bit easier to digest. So there are 4 prerequisites exams to pass before you get the application architect badge. There is the platform app builder, the sharing and visibility designer, data architecture, and platform dev 1. Once you get all of those, you are an application architect. And I want to just tell you, first of all, we're talking about coming at this from an admin perspective. Do not be put off by that word architect. Now here's why. Salesforce say that the application architect track is really aimed at people that have a deep understanding of native features, native functionality, and the ability to model a role hierarchy, a data model, and sharing mechanisms. Does that sound like anyone you know? That's basically what an admin would do, or what a functional consultant, a functional person would be doing, is dealing with all of these kind of cool features. So don't be put off by that word architect. However, just because you shouldn't be put off with it and you could do it, isn't good enough reason why you should do it. And this is what I kind of want to talk about now. So you might be thinking, why should I care about this? You know, I'm not an architect. I don't design and build applications, I just maintain one of them. So why should I care about all of this? And there's a number of points that I'd give in response to that. One is that I would argue you do design, you do build your application. Every time you decide what data type a new field should be, what kind of relationship type a new relationship should be, you're designing. Every time you add a new workflow, build a new process, you're building. So you might as well go and learn some core architecture principles and make sure that you're building those things in the right way and you're designing them with the right considerations in mind. I seem to have skipped a number of them there. Let's go through them. So the other thing is, even if you have the easiest admin job in the world and you are just maintaining a single system, it's a lot easier to maintain one that's built on solid foundations and that you know is structurally correct and appropriate. The other thing is, you're an admin today. That doesn't necessarily mean you'll be one tomorrow, and this is the journey I've taken from admin to consultant and architect. And then the fourth option is, to be honest, the reason that I kind of took myself down this path is learning for learning's sake. It's nice to pick up these certificates and to actually get new knowledge and learn new things. And that kind of translates into this phrase, because it's there. So for anyone that doesn't know this phrase, this was a response given by the mountaineer George Mallory when he was asked, why do you want to climb Mount Everest? Because it's there. It's a similar thing with the certification track, the learning for learning's sake approach. It's there. If you can do it and you have the resources and the capability of doing it, then why not try? Why not stretch yourself? Okay, so if I've convinced you that we are going to climb the mountain, how are we going to do it? Well, the way to climb a mountain is one step at a time. So we're going to be talking through each of the 4 prerequisites to get you up to the application architect base camp, if you like. And on each of these exams, I'll just be running through some of the new things that you'll learn. So maybe some elements of the curriculum or the learning that are in these exams that you may not have come across before. We'll be picking up some of the key things you'll need to know through the exam, and the new things you learn and the key things in the exam are always the same. Quite often there's a lot of stuff in the exam that you will already have a decent handle on. And then for each of these exams, I'm going to give you my patented awesome admin difficulty rating. Now this is where I have to put a massive warning on this and say it is incredibly subjective. When I do an exam, I come out of it thinking it was difficult, it was easy, it was hard, whatever. It's not going to be the same as your approach. It's going to come down to your current knowledge, your preparation, even the style of questions. So take it with a pinch of salt, as we would say in England. So let's take our first step and look at the Platform App Builder Cert. So firstly, let me ask, who's already got this one? This is, yeah, okay, so roughly half and half haven't. So let's talk about, for the people that haven't done this, where to start. So Salesforce suggests that the Platform App Builder exam is targeted at those people who have designed, built and implemented custom applications declaratively. Similar to what we saw across the whole application architect, that does not rule many of us out. If we're building a system, if we're even maintaining or looking after a system, we'll know these core principles. So let's look at some of the newer stuff that you'll learn that you may not have covered in the admin exam when you go to study for the platform app builder. So one of the main differences, Platform App Builder is essentially a direct replacement for the old developer cert, more or less. That may not be the official line, but there's a transition exam between the two, or there was, so that's my take on it. These things are new areas that were not in admin and not in the dev, or not in the old dev. So things like Lightning components, you don't need to learn how to build them, but what they are, where you can use them, and when they might be useful. Mobile customization and actions, so a lot of Salesforce 1 stuff. How do you brand it? How do you configure the navigation? How do you use quick actions to allow users to do things more quickly from mobile? And application development, which is a very scary term, but essentially just means how do I use my sandboxes best? What kind of structure would I put in place with my environments if I want to develop an application? So those are the newer things that you'll pick up when you study for the Platform App Builder. These are some of the key things that are in that exam. Virtually all questions, or certainly a huge proportion of questions in the App Builder exam have this kind of format. It's around what feature or what type of something to use in a certain point. So you'll be given a scenario and asked to identify what to use when. So it could be data types, relationship types, it could be automation, which of these can be achieved via a workflow rather than a trigger or a process. Things like, when should you go to the App Exchange? What should you look to third-party providers for in terms of apps? And then use cases for things like external objects as well. So this one, I think, is pretty easy. I think if you've got admin, if you've got dev already, this isn't going to pose you too many problems. And again, subjective, but there's nothing really here that should scare you, and hopefully the half of the room that have already done this would agree with that. So we'll move on to our second, which is the first designer exam in name, the Sharing and Visibility Designer. Now this is really around designing sound scalable performance solutions that meet all your sharing and visibility requirements. So what I think is important to point out that you'll learn along the way we're preparing for this exam is it will go over a lot of very familiar sharing features that you'll already know, but it will show you how they work under the hood and how they work at a more technical level. And there's an example of that coming up later. Also, as well as just, I am a user logged into my Salesforce org, what do I see, what do I not see, it will talk about sharing in code. So the differences between with and without sharing that Alba covered in her session earlier. And also communities. So depending on what type of community you're using, there's different ways you can set up sharing for each of those community types. But once you've covered the groundwork, you've done your prep, you're in the exam, these are the kind of things that you'll be looking to be tested on. Really, it all comes down to this point. How do you architect, how do you build a solution that is designed for scalability and for efficiency? So a system that maintains its efficiency and all of its security requirements, even when you go from having 10,000 records to 10 million records, your system needs to be as performant and work in the same way. So this is an example of the kind of things that you will already know from sort of basic sharing, but you get to learn under the hood. So things like share tables and group membership tables are essentially what underpins things like the role hierarchy and public groups. These are things that as an admin, we're used to, we know how they work from a point and click in the setup menu. The study for this exam will teach you a lot about how they work under the hood and when they get recalculated and where some of the performance issues could come in, such as if you say you've got, all of my accounts are owned by an admin user, I've got 2 million of them, and I decide I'm going to move that user in the role hierarchy. Is that a brilliant idea or a terrible idea? You'll also learn a little bit about Apex Managed Sharing, so what it is, when to use it, how that interacts with other sharing capabilities on the platform when it gets recalculated. And all of this really combines to a slightly more difficult exam because there is new stuff to learn, but it's still not going to tax you incredibly much because it is, as I say, it's learning under the hood mechanisms that drive the things you're already aware of. So to that extent, this is more of a learning exam than really having to just take on board new things. There'll just be levels of detail. So our third exam is the Data Architecture and Management Designer. This has a very similar description. This is all about performance solutions. This time we're talking about data management and high data volumes. So that's really the key thing that you'll kind of learn along the way here, is what does large data volume mean? So what is an LDV environment? How can you tell when you're in one? How does it vary by object? What are the considerations? What are the risks? Now basically what those risks and considerations are is that when you have millions and millions of records, it can take longer and be less efficient to query them. So you'll learn a lot about how to make your queries more effective by using selective filters. You'll learn about skinny tables and indexes and what the differences are between those, and also the differences between SOQL and SQL. So what does query language do versus what does search language do? What should you use when? And again, it always comes down to performance in these designer exams, really. So how do you tune performance for large data volume imports, updates, exports, so that you'll learn a lot about bulk API, whether to use serial or parallel processing, some amazing piece of magic called PK chunking. There's lots of things that will teach you new concepts that you'll be able to put into practice when your org scales to a large data volume org. However, these points aren't here under key because they're most of the exam, but data quality and data governance and master data management are two areas that will appear in the exam, even though there isn't a lot of learning material on them. So the point here is that this kind of results in a slightly more difficult exam than sharing, because the things that you learn they're about as easy or as difficult as the sharing exam. It's the things you can't really learn because the material isn't there. Things like who should be on a data governance team, or here is a simple integration landscape, which system should be the master data source. So I found this one a little more difficult, but your mileage may vary. And then finally, the platform developer one. I've put this one last. You can kind of see where I'm going on the difficulty ratings. This one I would argue with slightly. Salesforce say you need knowledge, skills, and experience building custom, declarative, and programmatic applications. I would argue about the experience, and I'll tell you why I'd argue that. I don't have experience doing that, and I passed the exam. I'm not going to tell you I passed it with flying colours, but I got through it. So some key things that will be covered in the platform dev are really core coding concepts: model view controller, difference between variables, constants, when to use triggers, classes, interfaces, controllers, etc. It's not just about writing the code though, it's making sure it handles errors gracefully and that you know how to best test and deploy it. And some key things for the exam, I'll focus on the second one really. Most of the questions I remember for this exam show you a code snippet and they'll ask you to essentially read it for efficiency. Where is the problem in this code? This code is failing, tell us why. Or this code has a security risk, tell us why. So all those things combined mean that it is one of the more difficult exams for someone from an admin or a functional background. However, it's possible, and we'll talk about some of the resources you can use to get there. So, if you get all those exams, you qualify as an application architect. Congratulations. But why should you stop there? Because we saw that is not the top of the mountain. The top of the mountain is up there. So once you've got application architect, maybe consider going for a system architect cert. This has 3 exams of its own, plus the platform dev that you'll already have if you've got the application architect. I've done one of these, which is the deployment one, so anyone's got questions on deployment, feel free to ask. The other 2 I haven't looked at yet. And then, of course, if you're looking to climb the mountain, then you really want to get to the top rather than one of these base camps. So that is the CTA, the Certified Technical Architect Cert, and really it's your kind of ticket to the elite in the Salesforce world. This, as we mentioned, is judged by a review board, so you have to stand up in front of people, talk through a solution that you've architected, and really have kind of explanations for all of your design decisions. Let's talk about some resources then. This changed very recently, in the last couple of days, but there is reference material out there. I've still used the term Architect Academy here. It's now available on the Salesforce website, so on the Salesforce certification site, there's a free library of self-directed training guides that will give you links to some really useful guides, videos, trailheads, etc. Talking of which, there's a number of badges that relate to these exams. And there's also a group on the Success community that shares the exam guides and some sample scenarios for people that are looking to make that step up to TA as well. Also, I'll let you know about a couple of certification promos. This one expires this month, so take advantage of this one if you can. Whenever you register for and complete 2 Salesforce Designer exams, you get 2 vouchers free. So you need to complete them by the end of this month. You can use the vouchers, I think it's by the end of the year. And then this is a relatively new one, 3 then free maintenance exams. So the more certs you get, the more it costs to maintain them, right? This is now a cap, so by the time you have paid to renew 3 of your certifications, the rest of your renewals for that year are free. So essentially, I think it works out you won't pay more than $300 or something a year. All right, felt like I rattled through that, so I'm perfectly happy if there's questions or you want me to revisit anything. But there you go. I hope most of all that you see now that this isn't a particularly scary track for functional people. There's some new things you'll learn, but that's the case with any exam, and it's something for us admin folk as well. So I'll take any questions, but otherwise, thank you very much.
I do have a question. The first question, because I'm curious, how far have you been on the mountain? Did you reach the peak or? No, yeah.
I'm very much still at base camp. So I am an application architect, and I've completed 1 of the 3 additional exams for system architect. So realistically, I would say that the top of that mountain, technical architect is a number of years away from me, because I don't think I have the experience or necessarily that I'm in the role that I need to gain that experience. That's not the goal. I would like to become a system architect in the next year. That would then qualify me to take the review board, but then I would probably spend another year or 2 making sure I was really ready for it, and then silently fail and not tell anyone and then maybe do it.
And from your own experience, do you think it's enough to try to pass this exam with the resources that you shared, or the online documents and the trailheads, or do we need to practice a lot, like based on our own experience, so in projects and so on?
So I guess the easy answer is any experience you can bring to the table as well as what you learn is going to pay you back very well. The study materials I found enough, because they're not just read this, they actually have exercises as well, where you get given a kind of a mini scenario and get asked to consider how you would build a sharing model for this, or how you would import this number of records with this kind of this requirement. So I would say they may be enough depending on what else you've done. The more you've done, the better. And I would also say that by the time you get to the point in your career when you start thinking about these exams, you likely have a good enough experience, even if that experience isn't as an architect or as a TA. You'll know the core platform features, you'll know the kind of questions that come up in these exams. You'll be able to navigate your way through with that learning material.
Thanks. So I've got, I did admin, then advanced admin, and then platform builder. And so I feel like I've got the choice now. Either I deep dive into the platform via the application architect route, or I do the consultant exams, which there's quite a few of them now, aren't there? And so I just wondered what your recommendations would be. I do work at a customer, I'm not a consultant, but it's the consultant exams before we had this track, they were the next thing you'd do after doing your advanced admin.
So I think that there is a similarity. The consultant exams and the architecture exams all have scenario-based questions. So whereas admin and I think app builder as well are more functionality-led, how do you do this? Both of those tracks will teach you to answer the questions around which of these options that are all possible would be the best to use in this scenario. I did the consultant exams when I was still an admin, because they helped me learn the clouds better, and they helped me sort of know to ask the right questions as an internal BA, even though I wasn't customer facing. These, I think, especially sharing and especially data architecture, are really good options for you to learn those features well. So if you're in an org, even if it's a single org that is likely to scale in volume, then those two set you up really well to manage that kind of that way of doing things. The consultants, I think, are more, they're more cloud-led. So if you know you've got a big service cloud implementation coming up, that's a great way of preparing you for it. If it's just about gaining more knowledge yourself so that you're better prepared for future application development cycles, then the architects, I think, add really well to your arsenal. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.